From the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight.
Welcome to Broncos Country Tonight as we break down the Broncos' loss to the New York Jets 16-9. You know, in a lot of ways, Ben, this game played out like we broke down all week long on Broncos Country Tonight. We thought the inconsistencies of the New York Jets offense, specifically Zach Wilson, who were 16 for 26, 121 yards, took 3 sacks in the game. We knew they'd have a couple of nice moments with the run game, which they did. We knew they were going to play pretty good defense. The hope at that point was the Broncos offense with Brett Rippon, especially running under center, which, by the way, they did more under center in this game than they have all season. We thought that would be a little bit of the key for the Broncos offense to find some consistency, and unfortunately they really did not. So I guess, again, not to have another broken record kind of conversation, but it does a little bit feel like that after this loss.
Well, I mean, there were some positive takeaways. I thought the defense played pretty well other than the busted run to Breece Hall. I thought they played pretty well. And by the way, it's interesting how much toss is being run in the NFL right now. They're running it's basically a Zorro concept where they're pulling offensive linemen. So many people are doing it. We're doing it a lot. So many people are doing it a lot right now. But that's beside the point. I thought overall there were good takeaways. There were bad takeaways. What were they doing kicking a 55-yard field goal in swirling 25-plus mile-an-hour winds? Now, they eventually died down later because everybody was asking the same question. Why can the Jets make them and we can't? The extra point, Corliss Waitman was moving the ball when he was trying to kick it, so that's 4 points off the board right there. And you know, this team, it just feels like they're making the wrong decisions. They kick when they should, when they should go for it. They punt when they should go for it. When they should be punting, they're kicking astronomically long field goals. And I don't understand what's going on right now. 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, you're 13% more likely to get it by running the ball than throwing. And what do? We throw the ball 80% of the time. It's baffling to me. And so there were good to take away, but there's also still this consistency of like, hey, we're not putting ourselves in the best position to win. We're already a limited team. We have one of the most injured teams in the NFL right now. We're already in a limited space, and it just feels like we don't understand or have a sense of urgency about the margins.
Yeah, I think sense of urgency is a good way to describe it. And Coach Hackett talks about that all the time, that we have to have that urgency. I hear the players talking about it. It just doesn't really seem like you're seeing it on the field, especially from the offensive side of the ball. Yeah,
and that's sort of the problem. You could talk about anybody could say anything they want, but at the end of the day, you are what you do. And at the end of the day, this team is not getting it done. I mean, you've had over 16 points over offensively in a game. What, one time this year, the Raiders game? You've given up. You've held opponents to 19 or less every game except one, the Raiders game, which was 32. But really, there was a pick 6 in there, so that really would have been 25.
Fumble recovery touchdown, right?
Well, yeah, sorry, yeah, fumble recovery, pick 6, and you still lost, all those games but 2, and so it's just. This falls on the offense. There's no ambiguity here. This falls on the offense. Were there some other gaffes on special teams along the way that have cost you games? Sure. But in the end, it falls on the offense for not scoring enough. And I think it's past time, really, that the offensive staff said, hey, look, we need to do some self-scouting here. We are not getting it done. Is it the players executing or is it us? And, if you bring in other players and they're executing, they took, one sack yesterday, I think it was?
One sack.
So you can't pin it on the offensive line, the protection anymore. Brett Rippon got the ball out. So you have to have an honest look in the mirror. And I know that's tough to say sometimes I'm failing, It would have put a lot of confidence in me if Coach Hackett had said, hey, you know what? Me and Coach Otten, we're taking a step back this week. We're going to let Clint Kubiak come in and call the play, run the practices and call the plays this week while we do some self-scouting on our end. I'm going to still be the head coach. He's still going to be the OC, but we're going to have Clint calling the plays from up there in the booth, right? Justin's going to run the script, and I'm going to oversee the operation. We're going to take a step back and self-scout. It would put a lot of faith in me that they recognize there's a problem and we're trying everything. But instead, what we got was a fiery Coach Hackett. And I understand being angry and being fiery. What we got was a fiery and defiant Coach Hackett in the press conference after the game, and I don't know how that's going to play. I felt a dramatic shift. Some of the people I talked to yesterday that are in other aspects of the Broncos organization, there's a dramatic shift. The winds of change are coming, and he needs to turn this thing around fast. I like Coach Hackett as a person, but he's got to turn this thing around fast, and he's got to turn it around consistently, and he's got to do it now, or he's not going to be here to see it next year.
Yeah, Coach Hackett is very likable, and we've talked about that all offseason. And of course, we also added the other side of that is because he's so likable, what happens when things aren't going well. Mm-hmm. But to that point, yeah, I sort of put that out as well on Twitter, that it feels like an opportunity might present itself. Maybe not this week because you are traveling to London. But you have the bye week coming up on the other side of this. That seems like the perfect timing, and maybe it is the perfect timing for this team to sort of reevaluate what they're doing. They talk about self-scouting all the time, but understanding when you're self-scouting and you're still coming up with the same response, the same answer, there has to be a point where you're just like in a silo saying we're all kind of saying the same things and nothing really is changing.
If we've exhausted every option but that option, then that's probably the option you should exhaust because you don't have anything else. You've exhausted the other options, right?
Yeah.
So, it's time for them to take a look at that. Calling the plays from the sideline is always difficult for an offensive mind. It is. Some guys can do it, some guys can't. And there's no shame in saying that you can't do it. You can't be a head coach and call the plays at the same time. There's no shame in that. As long as you're able to find, as the head coach, the guy who can do it and can maximize the talent. And I think that's the crossroads that we're at here. And I hope that Coach Hackett arrives at that conclusion sooner than later because he may not have the option sooner than later.
One of the conversations we've had coming into this game specifically, and really about the offense, is how much they're under center. And so I took it upon myself. I actually went through the entire game and I mapped out how much they were under center in this game. And it was the most they've done all season long, 41%, 31 plays versus 13 last week where they were under center. And now, again, we know Russell Wilson likes to be a little bit more in shotgun, right? With Brett Rippon, one of the conversations we had this week was, hey, well, you got Brett Rippon in there, you're probably going to be under center more. Well, they definitely were. The first half, 24 plays under center. Their touchdown drives, 70% on the one touchdown drive, they were under center for most of that drive. The other long drive, 11, they had I want to say 6 of 11 plays were under center. So the Broncos found a lot of success. And then what did they do? They come out of third quarter, 6 straight plays in shotgun because they got the ball after halftime. 6 straight plays in shotgun, 6 pass plays, not even runs, all 6 pass plays. So for me, if you just want, and again, this is a microcosm, right? This isn't like, oh, this is it. I figured out everything on the offense. No. It's just a microcosm of you're the 32nd ranked offense in the third quarter. And you didn't score any points in the second half of this game. And maybe one thing to look at is just your overall philosophical approach on having your quarterback under center.
Absolutely. And we've talked about how Coach Hackett subscribes to the middle eight, right? Winning the last 4 minutes of the first half and the first 4 minutes of the second half, winning that period, right? And he does. And they win the tosses and they defer and they get the opportunities to do that and they blow it every time. And we've talked about, we've put suggestions as to why not run a second half script, a mini script in the second half. When Coach Hackett gives a halftime interview saying we want to commit to the run game, we really need to get back to committing to the run game in this game, and then goes out and throws 6 straight passes out of the shotgun, you're like, well, what are you doing? Were you lying to the reporter, or did you just let it get away from you? Where were the run calls that you supposedly wanted to get back to? Yep. So, it's baffling. And again, I like Coach Hackett as a person. I think he's fun. He wasn't my first choice for head coach, but I warmed to the guy after, hanging out with him up there briefly up in Indy at the combine and all that kind of stuff. He's just a fun guy. He's got a positive energy about him, but he looks like a broken dude right now. Like he just looks like a guy who's just who's obviously not having fun. You're on a 4-game skid. And that's not his. So he needs to figure out a way to get back to that. He needs to get a way to maximize himself as a coach and also maximize his players because what they're doing right now just isn't working.
Meanwhile, just for a couple of positives here to sort of end this thing, and of course, our next Broncos Country Tonight TV show will preview a bit of the London game against Jacksonville. But I want to, first of all, point out Jerry Jeudy, who I thought had a good game. I know he didn't end up coming with the touchdown. I thought Sauce Gardner. By the way, Sauce Gardner, I was the replay. Right. Listen, I said that the guy was grabby, right? And I said he's off to a great start, but he's already getting the respect as an all-pro out there. He is super grabby. He's everything I thought he was going to be in this game, and yet they just weren't calling it in this game for some reason.
Going back and look at the 822 last night, there was a lot of suspect officiating in that game. Now it went both ways. There were some calls that went the other way too, but there was a lot of that was one of the, I don't want to say the most poorly officiated games I've seen, but one of the more poorly officiated games I've seen on review.
I had to say that because I watched it as well, and I'm watching him get there early on what should have been called PI. I thought at least holding, if not PI, on Cortland Sutton on the 4th and 3, which again, they were always going to Cortland Sutton on that 4th and 3. Probably should have looked underneath to get just the yards. But again, that's a little bit of a microcosm of what this team is right now. Hey, we're throwing deep shots when we need 1 yard. But again, I digress. The point being is Sauce Gardner is exactly who I thought he was. The thing I want to come back to, a couple positives. First of all, Jerry Jeudy, 7 for 96. Made some big plays. Greg Dulcich out there making some big plays. Very athletic guy. Certainly showing why I thought he could be a big-time impact player for this team as a tight end. The Broncos only gave 1 sack. You mentioned that. 1 sack on the offensive line. Penalties. The Broncos way dialed down what they had been penalties. I mean, we talked about this team as being the number 1 penalized team in the NFL. They had 434 in the game. In fact, their first penalty didn't come until late in the second quarter. So some things, it's like it's not all broken. It's that leaky boat syndrome. It's just when you start to patch some holes, other things start to pop up. And again, Brett Rippon was going to probably turn the ball over at one point, right? Probably through a few passes he'd like to have back, but you're going to have to sort of find a way to survive that. And the defense held him to a field goal there. The Broncos offense just didn't have much of a response. And I think you said it perfectly. The Broncos zig when they should zag almost every single time, it seems like. Moments when you can control maybe the short-term, maybe even long-term outcome, you do the opposite.
Yeah, it reminds me of a line from a movie I saw once where these guys are talking to this, the protagonist, and he says, you fight when you ought to run, and you run when you ought to deal. And it's kind of feels like that watching this offense. It feels like that they pass when they ought to run. They punt when
Kenny Rogers song.
They punt when they ought to go for it. I don't, maybe Kenny Rogers, isn't he the chicken guy? Kenny Rogers Roasters.
No one to fold him. No one to hold him. I don't know. We got a little bit of fun. It's been a little bit of a rough go with the Broncos so far. All right. For Benjamin Allbright, I'm Ryan Edwards. Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight.
Denver's going to win it. You can stand up and salute in Denver, and you got the world champions that live in your town.